Hi guys, Cool here, and today I'm making another video about Alicent Hightower. Today's video is specifically going to be about Alicent's mindset and kind of what she's going through, which kind of drives her towards the kind of massive, inappropriate breakdown that she has in episode 7, which we all know about. Spoiler alert, obviously, because I'm discussing episodes which have already been, and I'll probably briefly talk about the book, but only very briefly. But an issue that I'm seeing, and I spoke about in my last video, is that I feel like people are so keen to be in the team narrative and to have an evil stepmother that they're not actually thinking about how Alicent perceives things, and they're doing it like this is a cardinal sin, right? So I've just finished my creative writing masters, and something that I feel like the viewers are doing a lot of the time is they're judging characters based on decisions they make based on what they know to be going on in the story. So for example, I didn't say that very well, but we're aware of miscommunications. We're aware of what the real relationships are between certain people, like we're party to every single scene. But I think people are forgetting when it comes to a show like this, and especially, let's be honest, when it comes to female characters, the characters don't have that same knowledge. So part of what's so great about this show is that they're really using that idea of misinterpretation and people being defensive and frightened and getting the wrong end of the stick and kind of lashing out as a sort of defence, and it's all this mess that could have been stopped at so many points along the way if there was more cohesion and communication. So I think that's part of what I wanted to talk about. So Alicent's breakdown in episode 7, and I think it is a breakdown because I think what we've seen, I won't get into this too much because of the last video I made, but we've seen a young girl who is coerced, has no power, no agency, has been told to toe the line. She has been groomed into patriarchy. She doesn't have the freedom Rhaenyra has to be more rebellious. Her father's not going to have that, you know. There's some real mixed messaging going on with her and Otto, I think. And something I found especially gutting, I think, at the end of episode 7 is after her breakdown, when her father actually finally shows her some respect and kind of says, you know, oh, I've got hope for you now, I didn't know that was in you. And it made me really angry on her behalf, because if you think about the fact that this girl has thrown away her whole life, her wants and her needs, because she was trying to be the person her father wanted her to be. And he's been telling her, you know, toe the line, obey me, be this, be that, and she's done it. And now she's having this horrific realisation that actually maybe her father wanted her to be more like Rhaenyra all along. When the whole time she was doing it to kind of please him and to feel close to her father and to be accepted, you know. It's a very real... I just think she's a great character because she's a woman in a, I'll say medieval, it's a fantasy version of the medieval era. It's that sort of society. And this is a woman who has put everything into playing by the rules. You know, she's very rules focused because it's the only thing she has any control. You know, she doesn't have control over anything. In this world of A Song of Ice and Fire, I think sometimes the only thing that the women do have any control over is their children. For example, with someone like Cersei. But with Alicent, it's even worse, because I don't even think she does have control of her children. I don't know if that's because she was like a younger wife, or maybe just because she has been so meek, so well behaved. She hasn't put a single step wrong this whole time. She's so repressed. And I really, really wish people would think about her perspective more. So let's talk about the Dagger incident. Just to start with, it wasn't the right thing to do. We don't want to be we don't want to be saying, right, your son took my boy's eye out. It's time to cut out that 5-year-old's eye. That's not good. Alicent herself afterwards obviously says that it was an ugly thing and she's ashamed of it. And I do think it's notable that when she does break down, she's not going for the children, she is going for Rhaenyra. You know, this is, even if she doesn't quite realise it, I think Rhaenyra's more aware. I don't think Alicent realises it's between them. And Alicent's tragedy is that all this pain piled on her by the patriarchy, all these restrictions, she's got so much anger coming up. She's got no one really to support her in it. And because of this lack of self-reflection, and because she's stuck in this situation, and because the alternative would be to actually have to face the fact that every single person around her in her life so far has let her down, apart from Rhaenyra, which in her head has been twisted around. You know, her father tried to make her think, oh, you know, Rhaenyra's lied to you, you can't trust Rhaenyra. That's the only true relationship she's got. Because she's in patriarchy, that feeling that she has, that valid anger, is completely misdirected, and it goes towards Rhaenyra, when really Rhaenyra is, I think, what Alicent wants to be. And I would also argue as a sapphic, it's who she wants to be with, really, honestly. I think her love for Rhaenyra is kind of this enduring, weird thing, and I love the way the show have done it. It's like, is it envy? Is it hatred? Is it like deep love and connection? Is she longing for something? Is it something she doesn't understand? I like that telling because, you know, I feel that as a sapphic. I get that. It can be very, very tumultuous when you don't understand these things about yourself. And I can't even imagine, you know, in that time period. So obviously she's lashing out at Rhaenyra, but I think really, if we're completely honest, so the things she's angry with really are obviously the patriarchal system she's in, but also Viserys. So I think because of the natural power imbalance of him being the king and to go against him being treason, I think that she has a lot of anger towards Viserys, and I think it's valid anger. And I think she's in this horrible trap, because as we all know, Viserys isn't a bad man. He's not an unkind husband. He's gentle with her, he's kind with her. That's very confusing, if you actually think about how confusing that would be for Alicent, because to a modern audience, we're still seeing that she's been coerced, you know. She didn't want to be with him, she's doing her duty, she's having to sleep with him and she doesn't want to. She's bearing his children, she's biting her tongue, she's doing her duty, she gives up all personhood, you know, she's a nurse to him. She does all of that for him. And he's gone along with it, you know, he wanted a younger wife and, you know, he made that decision. Now, I think as she's got older, remember when she got with him, she was very young. So now she's got older and she's got more sort of awareness. Where does she put that anger? Because Viserys isn't a bad man, and even if he was a bad man, what's she going to say to the king? It's completely in his power, and I think we need to remember this. Even Cersei, I think, we felt pity for in the early seasons of Game of Thrones. At least I think most people did, even though she did the most terrible things. Because even she, I mean, Robert was horrible, you know, really abusive to her, and she had no control. And I do think there's something in the A Song of Ice and Fire series about how women in that world sometimes can become really unpleasant and very nasty and spiteful. But I think that you do feel for them in terms of the way they got there. You know, they're not just waking up and choosing to be evil one day. It's really complicated, especially when you think about the fact that in that world, the only thing that most women of a certain class would have control over would be their children. So you get characters like Cersei who would actually commit the most evil crimes imaginable for their children, but it's because it's the only thing they have. Like, it's the only thing in their life they possibly have. Which doesn't excuse it, of course, but when you're looking at characters, you know, we don't want to look at, like, two-dimensional characters. We need to think about how they got there. So I think Alicent is having a crisis, because I think she's angry at her father and she's angry at Viserys, but she can't admit that, because how could you as a person, like, think about it like just you yourself. Imagine coming to that realisation that you've done all this, and that these people have actually harmed you in a certain way. You know, they have expected you to... They've really caused damage. And yet you're in their debt. You're in their power still. And there's nothing you can do, because she's married in. She's married in and she's got children, and she's just... What is she? She's like a spare part. And this is, again, why I think Viserys is getting off scot-free with viewers here, because he's not a bad person. However... he is hugely to blame for a lot of what's gone on. And even that's complicated because one of his flaws is that I think he's quite a kind man. I think he's quite a good man. He's certainly self-reflective. And in some ways that's a really good thing. You know, he doesn't like conflict. He wants peace. But I think that his big flaw, and that Alison sees and that frustrates her, because I think Alicent's brighter than Viserys, and I think she knows it. And I think she's had to keep that down all these years. He's not able to... He just wants to blanket over bad situations and say, let's all be friends, but he doesn't actually want to solve the issues. So he's actually causing a lot of the tension and making Alicent have to step forward more for the rights of her children. Now, when I've said this before, people have said, oh, so you think Rhaenyra should be, you know, she should be usurped. No, although also I don't really think any of them have a right to the throne. It's obviously, I'm a socialist, you know, I'm anti-monarchist, I don't really think anyone has a birthright to the throne. However, yeah, it should belong to Rhaenyra. But I think that what we're missing in the situation... Just think about it emotionally. I'm not saying you have to agree with it intellectually. Like, Alicent is not someone I don't think we're meant to think is in the right. I don't think she's in the right. You know, she's going to get completely consumed by patriarchy. Like Cersei, I guess, but I think it is different to Cersei. Imagine that you have given your life to this man and you've been impregnated against your will over and over. And this isn't even... You can't even get any sympathy for it because that's your duty as a wife. You know, in that time period... You know, he was kind to her, she was lucky. Imagine you're having those children and he still wants to keep seeing you, because remember in those old episodes where we saw the contrast with Rhaenyra being more kind of sexually liberated, although I would argue groomed by her uncle, which was really dodgy. I think that episode was actually showing us two victims of patriarchy and two victims of these kind of politics, and in some ways victims of the brothers. That's my reading of that episode, actually. I know that's a bit controversial, but that's what I think they were showing us. And also, interestingly, with Kristen and Rhaenyra, it was really fascinating to me how Rhaenyra's mindset, in some way, caused her to kind of mistreat Kristen a little bit. Doesn't excuse where he's gone after that. Like, that man has gone full incel for sure. But I think that was an interesting chain. It was very interesting to see her spending that time with Daemon. And I've said for a while that I think Rhaenyra's relationship with Daemon is complicated, because I don't think she necessarily realises. I mean, A, she's been groomed. But second of all, I don't think it's the romantic love that people are thinking it is. I think Daemon is everything that she wants to be. I think she sees that they have similar qualities, but he can get away with it. He's admired for it. You know, he's the rogue prince. And I think she longs for that. I think that's what she wants. I think it's very complicated. But Alison is having to have these children against her will. And we know that childbirth is dangerous. She's risking her life. So she's doing this. And even once she's given him an heir and she's given him a spare, he wants another. He still calls her to his chambers, and she just has to go with it. She's tired. She doesn't feel like it. She's absolutely at the end of her tether. You know, she's depressed. This poor girl is absolutely depressed. And yet she has to perform her duty. And I can understand why emotionally she might start to break down as she gets older and think, but if you weren't going to bestow anything upon our sons or our daughters, then why did you keep making me have them? Why didn't you just marry me? Why did you keep making me have these kids? I think that's a valid thing to think about. And again, I don't think that it would be right to usurp Rhaenyra. Although, I think another interesting point of view that I only thought of recently is obviously the council that ruled in the past that Rhaenys couldn't be the heir. So they made a ruling that it can't pass down. So in this sense, so Viserys wanted the throne, or was at least, you know, put forward for it and was willing to take it, on the basis of that ruling. So they went through this whole ruling that, okay, a woman can't inherit. So in Viserys' interests, he went along with that. He didn't decline it. He didn't say, no, give it to Rhaenys. And now he's changing it again for his own will. And I can see, although I do actually think that, you know, it's right that Rhaenyra is the oldest, you know, it should be hers. I can see why that could seem hypocritical to other people, because it does seem like he's just using the law and changing it however he wants. I can see that. And I also think, the actors have said themselves, so like Paddy Constantine, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, he's spoken about how it's pretty obvious that Viserys, he favours Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra is his favourite child, and I think that comes across really clearly. He doesn't really have a relationship with his sons. You know, he has a soft spot for Rhaenyra, which is all tied up in the grief for Emma, who died, and the guilt he feels. But certainly, I can understand Alicent having gone through that and had these children and given up her youth and her childhood to do it. She's not had love, you know, she's not had any of that stuff that Rhaenyra has. She definitely thinks that Rhaenyra is having a better time than she is, but that's another tragedy of the show, really, isn't it? Because you just want them to get together and, like, talk without these influences, so they would understand each other. And I think she just desperately wants something from Viserys. Like, she just wants some sign that it was worth marrying him. So when he accidentally calls her Emma at the funeral, I saw a lot of people being really excited about that. And I couldn't quite understand it, because it's not like... She was too young anyway, like, you know, even if she had been scheming to seduce him, like, she was young and he should have known better anyway. But she wasn't, you know, Emma died. In this version, you know, then he was looking for somebody, she was coerced into it. And I don't think that's a fun thing to watch. I think that's seeing a woman think that I've given my whole life to do this right by you, to do everything I was supposed to do, and I don't even matter to you. You know, and I can understand that feeling. I really feel that in her. Now, when it comes to her children, she has kind of unwittingly been brought into the game by her father, and I think you can tell her naivety at the very start of the show, where, you know, her father puts it very bluntly, you know, we know, because of the Game of Thrones universe, once you play, you win or you die. But she's still under the illusion in the show that it's okay, she can have Aegon, and Rhaenyra can still inherit, and everything will be fine. And it's Otto who kind of tells her the hard truth, which is that him existing, the fact there is going to be a male heir, Viserys has a male child, means that no matter what happens, there are going to be people that rally behind him, and that is going to be a danger to Rhaenyra's claim, which puts him in danger. And that's a horrible thing for her to think about, but it's true. I will say that's true, because if we look at actual history, you know, if you look at the way, for example, Henry Tudor, Henry VII had to take out the last of the Plantagenet line, it kind of has to be done in that world that they're in. I don't support the kind of world they're in, but if we're in that world, that does make sense. There will always be people who will want to mount a rebellion or contest a claim, and they'll use these people to do it. So just by having Aegon, by having her children are at risk by being born. Right, now add on to that. So that's something that Alison, I don't think, really thought about when she was younger, and now she's had them and they are her children and there's nothing she can do. Add on to that Rhaenyra is not having legitimate children. And of course, from a progressive standpoint, good for her. I like the fact that, you know, she respects Laenor and they kind of go off and do their own thing, and I love her relationship with Harwin, and I really think the only thing the show's done wrong, I think, was how fast that time skip was, because I really wanted to see them together more. I thought we'd get that. I was a bit sad about that. But Rhaenyra is obviously having sex with somebody that she loves, or at least really cares for. And, like, you know, she says, doesn't she, that she found joy with him. And she's also, you know, she's had Kristen Cole. She hadn't had Uncle Damon, but, you know, that was a weird grooming situation that was just horrible anyway. But, you know, from Alicent's perspective, she's looking at Rhaenyra getting away with these things. Now, Rhaenyra is finding joy. Rhaenyra is able to be open in her sexuality. And Rhaenyra doesn't have to follow the rules. And this is what I think really gets Alicent. Because it's one rule for her and another for Rhaenyra. And I don't think Alicent's wrong to perceive that at all. She's wrong in thinking that Rhaenyra needs to be brought down in order for her to get her rights. You know, obviously that's why she's leaning into the patriarchy, because if she was more aware, more forward-thinking, she'd be thinking, wait, I can assert my rights and join with Rhaenyra, and I'm sure Rhaenyra would also help me, you know. But she misses that a lot, because she's always listening to her father, and she doesn't trust Rhaenyra. But every time Rhaenyra commits treason, essentially, I mean, every single child she's had is treason. Now, imagine from Alicent's perspective, okay? Imagine that every night she has to sleep with Viserys. There's enough children, you know, there's an heir. Her children aren't even going to be heirs, but she has to keep doing it. She's still doing all this. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra has got some really hot boyfriend who's a knight, who is clearly the father of her children. It feels to her like Rhaenyra's not doing her duty. Now, Alicent has put in that duty to the extent that she's lost herself. You know, she's lost her life, essentially, to duty. And I think it's jealousy and it's anger and it's hurt that Rhaenyra has been allowed. It's basically, why is it one rule for her and another rule for me? She's right to think that. I do think she's right to think that, but she's wrong to turn it on Rhaenyra. It's not Rhaenyra that's the problem. That's where she goes wrong. When she says, where is duty, where is sacrifice, where is honour, she's having a breakdown, because these were the things that she was raised to think were the most important things for a woman. So she did them because she wanted to be good. She wanted to be noble. She wanted to make people proud. She wanted to get everything right. She was a shy girl. She was a nervous girl. She didn't like to be observed. She's just desperately trying to do things right. But now she's older, she realises that she could have had all that fun and done the good things that she wanted and been herself, and perhaps got away with it like Rhaenyra did. That is going to mess with your mind. Right, now we're going to add the kids. So as I've said, Paddy Constantine has said that Viserys favours Rhaenyra. He doesn't really care about the children. Alicent does care about her children. You can see that she is very confused with Aegon, and she is doing the same thing that Otto did to her. So she is taking her insecurities, and although some of it is legitimate, I would say, you know, some people are saying that she's indoctrinating him into something that doesn't exist, and I think she's doing it the wrong way. But I do think in that situation, if your child is going to be considered a threat for living, I think you probably would bring your child up to kind of be ready to fight, and you might try and instill that in somebody, especially because poor Aegon. I say poor Aegon because I'm talking about young Aegon, like older Aegon. But he obviously doesn't want any of this. You know, he just wants to be young and chill and just this is too much pressure to put on him. And Alicent is having to do that. She's having to get angry with him and try and say, look, this is what my father taught me. And I almost think it's her and her youth thinking, don't make my mistakes, you know, do not waste it. I did not do all of this. I did not give up my whole life only for this to happen and for you to get killed. I think that's kind of what she's thinking, which is so tragic because it's actually her actions to a really high degree that set this whole thing off and ends in so much death and tragedy and the destruction of her own family. Helena, you know, she obviously cares a lot about Helena. I love the scene where she's kind of sitting with her and just trying to understand her. She doesn't understand her, but, you know, you can tell she cares about her a lot. But what I want to talk about is Aemond. Right, Alicent and Aemond is one of the most interesting relationships on the show for me. Because I think that people are really, really harsh on Aemond. I think because they know in advance, oh, he's going to be on the greens and he's going to be this, he's going to be that, we should hate him. Which is weird though, because even going by that, I would say he's kind of a parallel or a mirror of Daemon. People like Daemon, you know. I think people are getting into their teams very much, but I actually think they're kind of these two very similar forces in different ways. And I don't know. I probably need to read the book again, but I think I prefer Aemond. I think. Yeah, I think so. But I think a lot of people are getting really mad about Aemond early, and they're like, oh, look at this nasty kid, and, you know, oh, he's clearly evil, look at him, and the whole dragon incident. But let's think about that from his perspective and from Alicent's, because this is part of what sends Alicent into her spiral. So Aemond is her most... I know Helena's quite vulnerable, but because Aemond is a boy, I think he is more vulnerable in the sense that he has to go to the training grounds, you know. He's smaller than Aegon. He's quite serious, isn't he? He is bullied, and the actor who plays him and the writers have said that he's been ostracised, he's been bullied, he feels very insecure, he wants to prove himself. And also people are acting, you know, I wish people would think about the world of the show for this poor kid, because, you know, this is a world where he is expected to fight. He is expected to be strong. He is expected to have a dragon, you know. He didn't just wake up one day and decide these things. It's conditioning. That is strength. They are from the Targaryen line. The Targaryens are conquerors. You're supposed to be daring. You're supposed to do ridiculously dangerous things, heroic things, you know, powerful things. You are supposed to take what you want. That's what Dany says, you know, I will take what is mine with fire and blood. I will take it. That's what's respected as a Targaryen. So that's what Aemond's being brought up around. And this little boy is being mercilessly teased. And I don't even think that... Poor old Luke and Jace, I don't even think they mean badly. I don't know if Aegon does or not. It might just be that they think it's in fun, but obviously he's sensitive. So, you know, Aemond is sensitive and it really gets to him. It's really upsetting him. It's horrible, you know, they bring out a pig, they bully him, they say, oh, it's the pink dread, and this little boy is upset. He's so upset that he goes and he tries to find a dragon of his own, and he almost dies in the process. You know, that's how desperate he is to impress. And I think thinking about Aemond, maybe I'll make a video about Aemond when this series is finished, but he's desperately... If we think about the fact that his father doesn't really care about him very much. He doesn't even care about Aegon particularly. So Aemond is the second son, you know? If you think about what he's trying to do, he's just trying to say, look, see me. Somebody please see me. I can be a Targaryen. I'm bold and I'm brave, and look, like, everything he's done so far, being gentle and quiet, has earned him nothing but scorn. When this boy goes back to his mother... So first of all, obviously Alicent's telling him off for going near the dragons. And again, from Alicent's perspective, people say, oh, she's too ruthless. Is she too ruthless in a family of Targaryens? Because look at the people around her and what they're capable of. I don't think that is completely unjustifiable paranoia, because there are people around her, like Daemon, that do terrible things on the spur of the moment. That is a legitimate fear, I think. You know, that's not her being paranoid. You know, people are ruthless. The Targaryens are ruthless. Like, Rhaenyra was brought up to it. Rhaenyra is fearless. So she finds out her son's being bullied, and what does she do? So she comforts him, obviously, and she says, you will find a dragon, don't worry. Even though she, you know, doesn't like the idea of dragons. I'm with her on that. I don't mind the dragons, like, as things, but as weapons, they're basically nukes. They're so dangerous. But when she goes to Viserys about this, and you get the impression that this has happened over and over again, she goes to him just hoping for some support. Like, please, you know, do something about our son. He's sad and he's lonely. And she says that he's been being bullied. And Viserys' answer is just to say, well, it was his fault for being credulous. You know, he's gullible. He should have known better. And then when she says, but he's a child, he says, well, he's not really much of a child. The others are more of a child than him. Now, if that's what he's saying to Alison in private, how must Aemond feel? Like, how must Aemond feel? And let's think about who Viserys respects. Now, who do we see Viserys respect? There's two people he really respects. That's Rhaenyra, obviously, and Daemon, even though it's fiery. Right, so there's two people. You can understand why Aemond becomes the way he does, because those are the two people his father respects. He doesn't see him respect anyone else, so that's what he's going to try and be. That's the child he most respects, and that's the brother he respects. So I think part of him becoming a bit like Daemon is this kind of plea, even once his father's gone, to say, I was worthy. You know, I was a Targaryen. But Viserys is just useless. So we've also got this situation where Alison feels like she's going insane, because everyone can see that Jace and Luke and Joffrey are not Laenor's kids. Which I feel like she could have dealt with more if everyone wasn't just pretending they didn't see it. I almost feel like if someone were to just say to her, yes, we all see that, I feel like she would just be like, oh, thank God. Like, thank God, thank you. It's obvious, right? It's really obvious. And Viserys is just letting it go. And again, I think Viserys is at fault here, not for letting it go, because obviously that puts them in danger. It means, if he acknowledges that, again, it's difficult, because he has to admit then that Rhaenyra has committed treason, Harwin's committed treason, Laenor's committed treason. That means that they could be put to death. He's not going to want to do that. He's not going to want to jeopardise the succession. Like, he can't do that. But also the way he keeps letting Rhaenyra get away with this, and acting like he doesn't care about the other side of the family, I can understand why Alison starts feeling the way that she does. I can really see it. He won't even defend his son when he's being bullied. Now, this comes to a head in the next episode. So, the episode where Aemond loses his eye. So just think about this for a second. And it's been changed from in the books. So, obviously, in the actual books, it's actually after Laena's funeral. Not Laenor's funeral. So, it's not immediately... It's not like he steals a dragon from Laena and her daughters immediately. Also, I just want to say, as a book reader, dragons don't pass through families, so that's not how it works. Because think about how Laena paired up with Vhagar, how she tamed Vhagar. It doesn't work like that. You know, you claim a dragon, you will, you know, and they'll reject lots of different riders. It doesn't pass through the family. It's not like he's stolen something. But this little boy, he sees Vhagar as the biggest dragon, like the best dragon, and he thinks, if I get that, then they'll all see. They'll all see that I'm brave, and I could do it, and my father will care about me, and everything will be alright. That's his mindset. I don't think he has any, you know, people are portraying it as, oh, he's trying to steal it to hurt people. That's not what I'm getting, and it's not what the showrunners have said, and it's not what the actor who plays him has said. He just wants to show them and have the biggest dragon and say, you know what, I was worthy. I looked Vhagar in the face and she accepted me and she liked me. And I have that in me. So it's a huge thing for him. Now again, obviously, his behaviour is in the wrong, of course, because in the version of the show, you know, the girls have lost their mother, and that's her dragon, you know, they've grown up around Vhagar. It's terrible, and of course, Jace, who's close to them, is going to come rushing out, and so's Luke. They're just kids, right? I feel like I wish people would get this into their minds. They're just children, and I think part of the tragedy of the show is that they are children, having children sort of squabbles and issues and egos. Imagine them like a massive group of cousins. Only they've got nukes, and they've got families poisoning them against one another. They've got genuine... there's a genuine possibility that some of them will be a threat to the others, or that people will stand behind some of them. Like, it's not a normal situation. In some ways, we're looking at a very normal situation, because it's like this group of like cousins and like family that are young having an argument, which is normal. But introduce a nuke, a dragon, and a knife, and a load of titles and power, and, you know, people's status and their livelihoods resting on this group of kids, it becomes this toxic mess, and it gets so blown up. I felt sorry for Aemond, and I have to say this. They didn't know who had stolen Vhagar, and then they go, it's him. It's him. I don't know if you remember that line in that delivery, but play that back, it speaks so much. It's him. He's not one of them. He's ostracised. It's not, oh, that's Aemond. You know, it's him. And it's said like that weird one, you know, we don't get on with him. It's him. And when he says, it's me, although he's done something wrong, I feel pride. Like, I can feel that in him. It's like for the first time he's just saying, you know what, it's me. Yeah, okay, you don't like me? I'll show you. Like, I'll give you a reason not to like me. His behaviour is not good. Like, his behaviour is not good. But he does get attacked by 4 people. 4 people. And he's nasty. Like, I won't lie. He says some really horrible things. But again, imagine they're just kids in a schoolyard, okay? And this could get sorted out by the adults intervening and saying, Aemond, what are you doing? Like, why would you say that? They've lost their mother. Apologise right now. Right? And then you'd say to the other kids, also, why don't you try and include Aemond a bit more? Right? That's what you need. Not happening in this universe. So Aemond loses his eye. And I'm not going to act like it was like all, you know, they're all attacking Aemond, because he was brandishing a rock and he did punch a small child in the face. You know, it's not nice at all. But then think about Alicent. Right, so this is where I'm getting to with the Alicent situation. Now, Alicent has not been, she's not seen that happen. She doesn't know the full context of what's gone on here. All she knows, now imagine yourself in her shoes, and this is all I ask of people, so that you stop seeing her as two-dimensional. Imagine your son who is routinely bullied, who your husband has not stuck up for. Your husband has just said basically, oh, boys will be boys, kids will be kids, it's fine. Your son comes back to you, and he's missing an eye. He's wounded so badly, that's a terrible wound. This child is missing an eye. Your husband's done nothing about it. You are freaking out. Just think about it if it was your child, if you've got a child. Like, you would be absolutely furious. And imagine if when that happens, your husband just comes in and says, oh, tell me what happened. All the kids start piping up at once, but instead of listening to the children and listening to what happened and making like a fair judgment, or at least making people feel heard, he just puts a blanket over it and goes, oh, stop arguing, everyone, just be friends, be friends. I felt when Alicent said, that is not sufficient. I felt that. Now, what she said afterwards, I did not feel. But she's right. And that's this plea that I feel like all her life she's wanted to say that to everyone. This is not sufficient. That is not enough. She desperately wants to say that. So Rhaenyra comes in, and obviously it's even more complicated because these are her children. And them being called illegitimate isn't just a normal insult. Because if that gets out, they're in danger. She's in danger. It's accusing them of treason. You know, it's not just this kind of schoolyard, you know, insulting each other has consequences, because these aren't normal kids. They're not being allowed to be normal kids. They all represent things. And then you've got, so Aemond's sitting there, horribly wounded, and Rhaenyra's answer is to say he should be sharply questioned. Now, I don't know if people realise, but in the A Song of Ice and Fire world and in that lore, being sharply questioned means tortured, basically, to find out who said the nasty thing, like who spread that rumour. And again, I'm not trying to get at Rhaenyra, because I think like Alison, I think she's just lashing out for her kids, and I think that she wouldn't actually want that to happen. Like, there's no way she would. I think she's just trying to make a point here. Don't put my kids in danger, basically. But think about what Alicent knows about what's happened, right? She doesn't know the full context. All she knows is that her son has lost an eye. To her, she's not thinking straight. She's not thinking about... To her, she's thinking, oh, it's just an insult. It's just an insult. She's not really thinking, because she's so angry about what that means to Rhaenyra. She's at the end of her tether now. And she's thinking, you think that's a fair exchange? You've taken my son's eye. Like, he's forever maimed. Do something, Viserys. Like, do something. And when I've said this online, people have said, oh, so you want Alicent to actually take out a child's eye? Not at all. I do think Viserys could have said, what were you doing? You really shouldn't have taken out his eye. Please apologise. Please be nice. Let's sort this out. You know, there's a middle point here. Like, I don't know if they do detentions or, like, you lose your playtime. Do they have playtime? Like, I don't know. They could put them in time out. It's just, but even like, no matter what you think about that situation, Viserys didn't care to listen to what was going on. He'd already made his mind up. So it would have been alright if there'd actually been like a whole situation where people explain what had gone on and then he'd made his ruling. Fair enough. He didn't. He basically just, and Alicent notices this because she's clever, he just thinks, that's Rhaenyra's child, that's Alicent's child. Honestly, I mean, let's just get over it. Doesn't matter. Like, no one will be speaking treason anymore. And I just think Alicent is being humiliated. Her son has lost an eye. He's questioning Aemond, Aemond is in pain. He's a child. Who told you this, Aemond? As if Aemond is in trouble. Also, what a confusing kick in the teeth for Aemond, which is similar to kind of how I think Alicent must feel with Otto at the end of the episode. Because he's done this to try and win his father's respect. That's what you care about, isn't it, father? You want me to be more Targaryen. You want me to be less credulous. You want me to be tougher. You want me to go out and get what I want. I'm doing it. I'm being like Daemon, you know. I'm being like you want me to be. And you're angry with me about it. This is why I think that what happens later on with Aemond is, I will say that it's partly Rhaenyra and Viserys. They do have a part to play in it. Because, obviously, Alicent is poisoning Aemond's mind. You know, she's definitely she's giving him the idea of the rivalry that children just wouldn't develop. You know, children don't do that in families unless the families are hyping up some feud, you know, they get all these different resentments and ideas about each other. Kids are just innocent and they just want to get along, generally, I think. But it plays right into Alicent's hands and Otto's hands. Because in that moment, when Aemond has actually gone through something so painful and so traumatic and so confusing, he has witnessed his father get angry with him and let Rhaenyra and the boys off scot-free. He's heard Rhaenyra say, "You should be sharply questioned," which I'm sure was just a slip of the tongue because she was annoyed, just like Alicent. But in his mind, he's probably thinking, wait, maybe my mum and my granddad are right. Like, maybe if they had the chance, they would hurt me. Maybe they are dangerous because they want me sharply questioned and I've already lost an eye. Like, that's kind of the mind space that I'm kind of going into when I think about that. And I also think for Alicent in that moment, you know, she appeals to the king. After all she's done, she's nursed him, she's given him everything, all of her, everything she possibly could. And still, he just kind of wants things to be brushed under the carpet and he won't have her back. She said in another episode, she just wants someone to be partial to her. She wants someone to have her side. And in a sad way, that actually comes to pass this episode. But it's in a terrible way because it's going to set off the dance it's going to be like a nightmare, like dominoes. Because she and Aemond seem to really solidify in this episode. I think Aemond actually thinks the only person who actually does have my back is my mum. Maybe she's right all along about all these other people. Maybe I should just be loyal to her. Maybe I should go all like Team Green. Maybe they're not my friends. Maybe they're not my family. You know, why do I keep trying? You know, when he says, don't mourn for me, mother, you know, it was a fair exchange. I might have lost an eye, but, you know, I've won a dragon. That boy that's a little boy, and he's thinking about, he recognises his mother's disrespect. He comforts her. I don't know if you've seen the scene. He holds her hand. He rests his head on her. That boy is thinking, don't worry, mum. Like, you know, you're my mother and no one respects you, but I'm here for you. I'll step into that role. I'm going to do it. And I think Otto watches that as well. But shame on Otto, because if Otto was any sort of father, then Aemond would not have to step up in such a way. And it also makes me like Aemond more. You know, I like the complexity. He hasn't done anything terrible yet. He obviously will, and then I'm sure I'll change my mind. But I still think people are being really harsh on him and not thinking about the fact that, you know, he is a mirror of Daemon, and he's not actually yet done as much that's bad as Daemon, really. It doesn't seem like. This little boy has been maimed completely, and although what he did was wrong in claiming Vhagar the way he did, to him, he's just been bullied, and he's kind of fought back, and he's got a bit of power, and because he's been so bullied, he's misused it. You know, he's got power, and he suddenly thought, you know what, I'm going to be nasty, I'm going to get you back. It's so sad, it's just psychology. It's just so sad, the whole situation is so sad. And I definitely think in the episode with Laena's funeral, there's a moment where you see Aemond walk up to Jace. And there's a moment, and I feel like he wants to connect with him. He knows what it's like to feel sad and feel lonely and not have the words to express it. And I think he sees a kindred spirit there. And then you can almost see it on his face thinking, but he won't want to talk to me anyway. I'll go. It's so sad. It breaks my heart. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up because I've spoken for so long about like 3 scenes. But I think that Alicent's breakdown is not just... You know, I'm seeing people saying, oh, she's just so evil. She wanted to take out a kid's eye. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that was awful. It was really awful. I don't actually think she meant it. I have to be honest. I think it was just a sudden, like, surge of everything coming out of her. She's so repressed. She's just begging for some sort of justice in her mind, isn't she? She's just screaming for it. You know, she wants to make a point to Viserys. you know, she's trying to get, she's like, so Kristen, you're sworn to me, aren't you? And he says, well, I'm only sworn to protect you. You know, it gets to a point where she just has to grab the knife herself. She is in desperation, and Olivia Cooke acts it so well. This is a woman completely unravelling. And then by the end, Otto again messes things up, because in her moment of reflection, she is ashamed of herself. She is horrified by the way she's acted. And a lot of people aren't, you know, people want to caricature Alison, but she was horrified by what she did. You know, she thinks it was awful, it was ugly, she's ashamed of herself. And she immediately tries to rein it all back in again and try and, you know, do better for Viserys, because she's lost control of herself. And then also gives the absolute kicker, which is suddenly to start showing her respect, like, oh wow, you've had this in you all along, great, let's be friends, suddenly I respect you. I'm back to that feeling of how must that make her feel. She gave up her life being this person that he wanted, and yet it's not even the person he wanted. Now he wants this. That woman is having a breakdown, and I don't blame her. I really don't blame her. Okay. I love you loads. Please don't come at me and, you know, with the whole, like, teams thing. Like, I'm not on any team. I just feel bad for all the characters involved, honestly. And I really do. But I was just thinking about that scene a lot. It's really sat with me. I think the way it was acted, and there's just so much in that scene is so brilliant to watch. You know, it's this complete breakdown of the family. I know it's set in this medieval fantasy realm, but it's just a family dynamic thing, isn't it? It's just this, oh, it's so fascinating. It's like when there's clear problems growing, and, you know, it's like no one wants to think about the problems, and you've got someone like Alison who's like, this is getting worse and worse and worse and worse, are you going to do something? And just nothing, no help. Then it all explodes. And poor Alison, I think, is going to take a lot of the blame and a lot of the flack going forward, when I don't think she deserves as much as she's going to get, personally. Okay, I love you loads. Please tell me your thoughts in the comments, and yeah, I'll see you really soon. Alright, love you. Bye!